Welcome to the Workology Podcast, where we discuss the science and art of the workplace, gain powerful insights, resources, and perspectives on the industries of human resources and recruiting. Join your host, Jessica Miller-Merrill, chief blogger of bloggingforjobs.com, for an in-depth and no-holds-barred look into the future of our most powerful business asset, the employee. And now, welcome your host, Jessica, with this podcast episode of Workology.
The topic of leadership among human resource professionals and CEOs is a popular one, and 40% of our leaders say that the overall quality of their organization's leadership is high. However, only 15% of those same organizations have a strong bench. And in this competitive job market, where people are moving and shaking to new opportunities, this is a huge concern for most CEOs and certainly HR. Today we're going to be talking with Woody Woodward, Dr. Woody Woodward, on the Workology Podcast, where he's going to be talking about leading people and the qualities it takes to be a good leader. Welcome to the Workology Podcast.
It's great to be here.
Tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Sure. Well, the doctor comes from the fact I'm an organizational psychologist, and the Woody comes from my last name, Woodward, which I've been gone by Woody since I was 14, and I'm 42 now, so it's kind of stuck. But yeah, I started my career as an HR consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers in our HR consulting practice in D.C., and then moved on from that, went back to when I was about 30 years old to do my PhD in industrial organizational psychology, and was a poor student for 5 years, from 30 to 35. It was a weird experience going backwards in life in a way. And then I've been on my own for 10 years now, and most of my work is in management and executive development.
You have been on some crazy and really awesome shows. Talk about where you've spoken to kind of set the folks up to understand.
Sure, yeah, I do. So there's kind of 3/3 to my life, right? Or I split it in thirds. One is as a practitioner, which is where I spend a lot of my time as working with client companies on management and leadership development initiatives. The other third is I do workshops and seminars around the country, mainly focusing on that transition from being a star player to being a great coach. And then the other third is media. So I've probably done, 250 some on-air appearances over the last few years. I write a weekly column for Fox Business that posts typically Tuesday mornings, kind of at the whim of my editor, is what I'm learning lately. And I used to appear on the Fox Business web channel every week with a variety of different hosts. I've done The Today Show, Fox and Friends, CBS, NBC, CNN, the whole kind of runs the gamut. So mostly talking about work-life type issues.
And we will go ahead and post the link to the Fox column that readers can go to Blogging for Jobs and be able to check that out. You just go to the right-hand sidebar and put in Dr. Woody, and you'll be able to get connected to where to find out more about Dr. Woody. You mentioned player to coach. Let's talk a little bit about that first.
Sure. One of the frustrations I came across a lot in working with my clients early on was the fact that we had so many people in leadership roles at any level, whether a supervisor on the line, middle manager, or an executive, that were really struggling. And this is no surprise. If you look at a 2012 study from Gallup, they found that only 18% of those in this country that have people management responsibility are highly effective at managing people. So in other words, we're failing 82% of the time when we select and promote folks to a people management role. So beyond that is that we don't give them the support after we put them there. So we're not picking the right folks, A, and then B, we're not giving those folks any kind of support. So it's a failing proposition. But to me, it's an epidemic in this country, and that's why we have a real bad boss problem. And even though, there's jokes on it, like the movies Horrible Bosses in The Office and all that, but they're not that far from reality, and so it's kind of art imitating life there. So what I tried to set out to do in my practice, whether it's working with clients or talking to professionals like you, is how do we understand who to look for when we're promoting folks? So one of the major issues is you got to step back, and the kind of business standard is let's take the person who's the best at their job. Let's take our best salesperson, our best producer, our best line worker, and make them the boss. Now, there is no American sport that I've ever seen where you would ever take the MVP that year and make him the coach the next year, right? And it's very rare you will ever find a great coach who was also a great player. It's a different mindset, it's a different talent, and it's all about working through others, being that chess player. So the mistake we make is, we look for those top performers, and I think we need to stop doing that.
So let's say that we want to make the change, right?
Yep.
We want to look at promotion, hiring, building relationships, and developing our workforce differently. Where do we start?
Yeah, I never get called before the person gets promoted, so it's usually after the fact.
We've
right?
got a problem.
It's always too late. But it's not too late in that. What we have to do is help them step back, and I'm going to sound all preachy psychologist right here, but it's about self-awareness and reflecting, understanding, and as Marcus Buckingham would say, it's understanding where their strengths are and how to help them play to that and not shore up a weakness. So first thing when it comes to the reflection part is helping them understand life journey, where they come from, what informs how they make their decisions, get them more comfortable in their own skin. Then you start talking about how do you work through people. So the typical fallback is two things for a struggling manager. It's either they're going to dive in and do it themselves, in which case you're not leading anymore, you're right there in the trench with everybody, or they'll just start beating people up. They punish bad behavior or just all the above, and they don't spend time looking to catch people doing things right. And that's where we got to start, is how do I help managers figure out every single day, how do you go look at what your folks are doing, understand how to evaluate where their strong points are, set them up for success, and then catch them doing something right. We're so obsessed with punishing wrong or correcting behavior. That's, sometimes you have to do that, it may be in a safety environment or whatever, but punishing something will extinguish a behavior, it will not produce another new good behavior, right? And so that's where we have to kind of help managers understand that. And then I think really that to me gets into the idea of sort of light touch coaching. Going out every day, helping folks tweak. Don't worry about what happened yesterday, right? Don't spend time agonizing on the past. They made a mistake, great. Here's how to tweak it forward, not punish back.
So what does that do for performance reviews? And we look at these annual and semi-annual reviews. We're touching them daily, we're tweaking, we're teaching. How does that fit in? So,
performance reviews are pretty much a disaster, right? And so whether it's quarterly, half year, full year, here's what happens. It's where that's when the manager comes in and tells you about all the things that you've done wrong over the last 6 months or a year. And more often than not, it's a surprise to the individual sitting there, to the person being evaluated. So what I always tell any boss at any level, boo to you, you have failed if when the first time you're giving feedback to someone or helping them understand mistakes or whatever is in that performance review, you have failed. You have failed as a boss. You've failed as a manager. To me, those quarterly, half-year, whatever year reviews should be more about recapping sort of the big ticket items. You should be talking to them, touching them every single day. You should be, you want to set plans and set expectations because people need to know where they're going to go, right? You have to have goals, otherwise you're never going to get anywhere.
Sure.
So you set those goals, you help them, and then you help them tweak every single day. And the performance review should be more of a formality. Nothing new should be learned in it. Otherwise, in my opinion, you failed. So
it shouldn't be a surprise.
It shouldn't be a surprise, no. But I think a good mix. I think you need that light touch everyday coaching. I think you should be sitting down weekly with all your direct reports. And again, just tweaking, course correcting, thinking forward, not looking back into the past.
So let's say that we want to maybe implement in just the HR department, just to kind of start, that something like this. Where do we begin?
I think at first, it's less about the system and the structure and more about philosophy. So I think you really have to sit down and articulate a clear philosophy of how you're going to manage, how you believe you can motivate positive action, right? Good leadership is very simple, right? What does a leader do? They motivate people to go do stuff on their behalf, right? So you have to talk about, your beliefs and how you want to treat people, what your values are, your core values as individuals, as an organization, and not something a marketing department came up with. They need to be true and honest. You need to test those. Do you actually live by those? Because those will inform how you make decisions in an absence of knowledge or experience. So that's where you start first, is articulate a clear philosophy of how you believe you should treat people. and how you think you can influence them to action. So you start there. Then you get into the techniques for doing that, right? So how do you motivate action? You say, all right, every day I want you to think, when you walk out on that floor, think about catching someone doing something right. So pay attention, look around and see what they're doing. Oh, think in terms of tweaking, like I said before. When you notice something, think, all right, how can we adjust that a little bit to help it, to move the ball forward? Say thank you. Say thank you every day. People are working on your behalf, right, as a leader. So you need to let them know, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. People want to be recognized. You don't have to grandstand and bang pots and pans for somebody or throw a party, but you should celebrate success, even small ones. That's not to say you can ignore failures, mistakes. You have to address them. But you need to address them in a way that there's going to be a positive outcome from it, not here's what you did wrong and then you leave it at that, because it doesn't help. So that's to me where you start. And I think as someone who oversees a group of people with management responsibility, you need to hold them to that every week. How many people did you catch doing something right? What was that course correct? What did it look like? And then you got to track outcomes. In business, it's about numbers. In HR, sometimes we're back and forth about, well, it's people and don't worry as much about the numbers, it'll happen. No, I mean, there has to be outcomes. I think they're going to be longer term. You're not going to see a productivity number go up right away or safety issues go down right away, but over time you will. And you need to track that so that you can show those bosses that may have a little bit of a negative leaning that these positive things do have positive outcomes. That's where I think if you can track those numbers and show a shift in whether it's engagement, you're surveying it, whether it's production, whether it's cost savings or whatever, you need to track that and be able to tie it to that light touch, that tweaking as you go.
Do we need to approach the millennial workforce any differently using the philosophies that you're talking about?
Here's where I am very much in disagreement with the whole idea, this kind of cottage industry about millennials. Every generation has some kind of dispute with the generation before it. It's called human nature. And as a psychologist, I can tell you, we need to focus on human nature, right? Which has not changed, right? People like to say, oh, well, we've evolved and adjusted. No, we haven't, right? We all still need simple things. We need food, we need water, we need shelter, right? The whole Maslow hierarchy. We also need affiliation, we need recognition. We also need meaning and purpose to attach to, and that's a primary motivator of any kind of action is if you feel attached to it and there's meaning. That doesn't change across generations. So I think that it is so overblown, and to me, when I hear people talk about boomers, and I'm a Gen Xer and then Gen Y, the difference is, I think it's more of a stage in life difference than it is an actual generational difference. Now, that said, sure, Gen Y is the first generation to grow up truly integrated with technology. So there are differences in how they execute on things. There are differences in how they get work done. But the core nature of who these folks are is no different than any of us. We're all human beings. So how we're executing may be different. So there I would agree with, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. I feel like it's sometimes easy to just place the blame on one person or work towards saying like, this isn't working for us or you're doing these things wrong.
Right.
And you're really focusing on shift and change. And I like the touch methodology because it's ongoing. It is just like when I'm working like with my daughter. Like, you don't wait until things get so bad that it explodes. Like you want to reward and recognize ongoing and build those good habits so that she knows what I expect of her. Not that I'm saying that employees are like children, but I mean, that's the best way to get the best out of my daughter and certainly out of the employees that I have managed and led.
No, Jessica, I totally agree with you. And you make a great analogy there because if you wait, right, if you see your daughter making mistakes, if you see her struggling, and even when you see her doing positive things, if you wait like every 6 months or a year to tell her about what worked and what didn't, it'd be a disaster, right?
It's kind of like
silly.
Santa Claus, right? So we do Santa Claus in our house. So it's one time a year that you get rewarded if you've been good.
Right.
So that's kind of like what we're asking our employees to do.
Same thing.
Like Santa Claus. Like here's one day where you're going to find out if you've been a good kid or a good employee or a bad employee.
Right.
And Does that normally work? No. That's why they have the elf on the shelf. That little elf watches you and moves everywhere.
That's the coolest thing. This could be a whole movement, like Stop Santa Claus HR, that I think you've come up with right here.
That is, that's going to be my November and December theme on the blog. It's
I'll come back. And,
absolutely. Well, let's let the audience know how they can get in touch with you. So where can they go to learn more about Dr. Woody?
Just drwoody.com, drwoody.com. Or just Google Dr. Woody, and I'll come up in all the searches.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us here on the Workology Podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And thanks to you for listening in. This is the Workology Podcast, where we discuss the art and science of the workplace, HR and recruitment. This is Jessica Miller-Merrill. Until next time, you can visit Blogging for Jobs to listen to all our past Workology Podcast episodes.
Production services for the Workology Podcast with Jessica Miller-Merrill provided by Total Picture Media.